How can you fix your tight hamstrings? I'm going to give you 5 solutions that are much better than static stretching. My name is Dr. Story. I've been a chiropractor for over 24 years. I deal a lot with sports injuries. I'm going to give you some realistic advice based on my experience. Now, many people have tight hamstrings, and I'm going to give you some solutions to that today. And most people actually try to solve their tight hamstrings incorrectly, or will actually say inefficiently, by doing static stretching. There are better solutions than static stretching. Now, static stretching does work. However, it takes a lot of work to do it. It takes frequent stretching, and it takes a long time to get results. In this video, my goal is to give you better results quicker. So let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to stretch our hamstrings in a more efficient way. What you're going to do is you're going to put your hamstrings on stretch at the end range of motion, and then you're going to actually contract your hamstrings. So you're going to try to pull your heel towards your butt. I'm going to show you in just a minute. And what happens is when you contract the hamstrings, what you're trying to do is you're trying to gain strength in that range of motion. Your body will not allow a permanent change in your hamstrings if you do not have strength during that range of motion. So you can't just be flexible, but you need to be flexible and strong at the same time. So isometric contractions of the hamstring actually will help you gain strength in that range of motion, and thus the length of your hamstrings will seemingly change. In addition to that, we're going to use a principle called Sherrington's Law of Reciprocal Inhibition. Boy, that's a mouthful, ain't it? So what that means is if you contract one muscle on one side of the body, the opposite muscle must relax. So we're going to use that to our advantage by contracting our quadriceps while we're trying to stretch our hamstrings. So let me show you how to do this. So here what you can see is my body is in a position where there's a slight stretch of my hamstring. Make sure and do not have your leg fully stretched when you're going to do the isometric contraction. So there's going to be a slight bend in the knee, and what you're going to do is you're going to push your heel into the table or into the bed, and what you're doing right now is you're isometrically contracting the hamstrings. After you contract the hamstrings, then, and you're going to do that for 10 seconds by the way, then what you're going to do is you're going to let the leg relax so it fully extends, and during that full extension you are going to contract the quadricep muscle. If you contract the quadricep muscle, what ends up happening is your brain neurologically allows the hamstring to relax, thus giving you a much better stretch. Now the second solution is to use a lacrosse ball, and the purpose of a lacrosse ball is to remove adhesions from the hamstrings. Very often people have tight hamstrings because they actually have adhesions or scar tissue from old injuries in the hamstring. Now how you're going to do this is you're going to sit on a table. It has to be a firm table. You're going to get a lacrosse ball, and what you're going to do is you're going to take the ball and place it underneath the hamstring. Now if there's a spot where there is pain in the hamstring, you want that closer up towards your butt. So if I have pain right here, you want the ball about right there. You don't want the pain over here and the ball is right here. So you're going to place this on your hamstring, and then what you're going to do is you're going to point your toes and slowly extend your leg. And by doing this, you'll feel a stretching of the hamstring, and the compression of the lacrosse ball will actually help soften those adhesions of your hamstring. So I would recommend doing about 10 extensions and actually doing that every other day. Hamstrings are often tight because other muscles are not doing the job. So when you have tight hamstrings, sometimes it could be caused from the hamstrings being protective. The hamstrings are actually tightening, trying to stabilize a joint because other muscles are not doing the job. The most common is the gluteus maximus. So if your glute muscles are not working properly and not contracting and firing the way they should, then of course the hamstrings are going to try to make up the difference and chronically tighten. So I'm going to show you an exercise on how to activate your glute muscles. So what you're noticing when I'm doing this here is I have my legs at 90 degrees, I'm on the ground, and what I'm doing is I'm using my butt muscles to actually raise my torso off the ground. And the way to do this is to first squeeze the buttocks and then raise up. Try to avoid using your quadriceps in order to push yourself up. So the way to do this, you'll see that I have my toes raised off the ground. This helps activate the glute muscles. If I were to do the exercise with flat feet or on my toes, I would be activating the quadriceps more. So I recommend to patients to do 3 sets of 10 every other day, and this very often helps activate the glute muscles. The fourth solution is to strengthen the lower abdominal muscles. And the reason why is because this will correct anterior pelvic shift. Hamstrings are very often tight simply because we have anterior pelvic shift. The more our pelvis rotates forward, the more tension there is on the hamstrings themselves. And this is often because of lower strength in the lower abdominal muscles. So if you can increase the strength of your lower abdominal muscles, thus correcting, or partially correcting even, the anterior pelvic shift, it takes a lot of strain away from the hamstrings, and thus the hamstrings can finally relax and have better flexibility. So let me show you how exactly this is done. So first here, I'm going to show you how to improperly do a plank. You can see my back is arched, and I'm just holding myself up on my elbows. I'm not actually doing anything in terms of doing the exercise with my lower abdominals. So now you can actually see me pulling my lower abdominals in. You could see me posteriorly rotating my buttocks as well as my pelvis. And so if you do this properly, what you'll notice is your lower abdominals will contract as well as your quadriceps and your buttocks. If you are doing a plank and you are not contracting the quadriceps and the buttocks and the lower abdominals, then in my opinion, it's not going to help your hamstrings. So by doing it this way, you're correcting anterior pelvic tilt, and you're also getting a great core workout. The fifth and final thing that you can do is to stretch your rectus femoris as well as your hip flexors and psoas muscles. The reason why you want to stretch these is because these play a role in having anterior pelvic tilt. Once again, if you have anterior pelvic tilt, just like with the lower abdominal muscles that are weak, you tend to yank on the hamstrings and they will chronically feel tight. No matter how often you stretch your hamstrings, it will not undo a tight rectus femoris and a tight hip flexor. So you need to stretch the rectus femoris and the hip flexors. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And that way it changes the anterior pelvic tilt and thus takes the stress off the hamstring. Hamstrings start to feel better. Stretching the hip flexor is also important for anterior pelvic tilt. What you'll do is you'll be in this position and you will contract the gluteus medius and suck the belly in, and you will feel a stretch right in the psoas muscle in the front of the pelvis, and again, that will help correct anterior pelvic tilt. So what you will do is you will put your back knee up against a chair, and you'll put your foot up against the back seat of the chair, and your knee will be where you normally would sit. Now, as you're standing, most of your body weight will be on your standing leg, such that there really should not be that much pressure on the knee that you're stretching. If you're feeling a lot of pressure on your knee while you're stretching, you're doing it wrong. Make sure and stand up straight, tighten the buttocks, particularly of the back leg, and you will feel a great stretch in your rectus femoris. And that is how you do that. So those were 5 things that you could do to actually improve the flexibility of your hamstring. If you thought this video was interesting, give me a thumbs up, hit that notification button because we all need more of that. And if you have any questions, you can ask in the comment section down below. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Also, I have some supplemental exercises and stretches in the description area down below, so make sure and review those and ask appropriate questions on the correct video.